Can we start? Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you have logged from. Wildlifers, hope you're all doing fine. We members of Rotary Fellowship of Wildlifers for Conservation share a common interest, that is wildlife and its conservation, willing to work with the 118-year-old organization Rotary towards building a future in which people and nature thrive. To share a few notes about our fellowship group, we are a group of over 600 interested individuals who have globally united around a common interest with the primary purpose to network and further friendship. Although our fellowship activities are conducted independently of our Rotary International, they are in harmony with the Rotary policies. Our purpose is to create awareness about importance of wildlife, to promote lasting friendships outside one's own club, district, and country, and to promote locally, regionally, and globally that conservation of living resources are important to humans and future generations to enjoy our natural world and the incredible species that live within it. We have a chapter recently started in Trinidad and Tobago. Other than that, we have global members. We today have invited members of Rotary clubs and friends of Rotary from different parts of the world for this meeting. A hearty welcome to one and all. On behalf of all the wildlifers, I also extend a very warm welcome to our distinguished speakers, Mr. Ramesh and Rotarian Hanumant. And I request Vikram Hiresave to please introduce them to our audience.
Thanks so much, Sanjay. Having the Junglescapes team here has been a long pending discussion. Sanjay and I have been forever talking about it for the last 2 years, and extremely happy finally to have Ramesh and Hanuman join us today. I'll quickly talk about Junglescapes and then introduce both of them to you. Junglescapes has been doing human service for the last 15 odd years around Bandipur. They have won awards for their work, spectacular work that they've been doing. And they've restored severely degraded and invasive ridden forests around Bandipur to the extent of almost 4,000 acres, which is probably among the largest projects of this nature in India. And a lot of this had to do with the management of now very infamous invasive, the Lantana camara, and then you have the other bigger evils coming up, Senna spectabilis and others which have been coming in. And now we all become very familiar with them. The unique thing about what Junglescapes has done is they've taken a community participative model. They've included the local community, tens of locals, tribals participate in the restoration activity, and they've been doing an incredible work in what is known as the assisted natural regeneration method. I'm sure they will cover what this is in detail. And their recognition goes way beyond what awards they won in India, because both Ramesh and Hanumant have taken positions in the global organization known as the Society for Ecological Restoration. They're playing a global role now. Very proud of having known them for all these years. Incredible work. I'll just quickly introduce Hanumant and then Ramesh. Hanumant is past president and Paul Harris Fellow, and he's been with the Rotary Club of Mysore West since 1996. He's the environmental chair for RI District 3181 for 21-22. He was, and he's a board member at SRAG for South Asia, and he's also currently the director at large for the International Network for Seed-Based Restoration for 22-23. One of his passions has been to spread, bamboo seeds across India. And in the past few years, he's managed to, through the Rotary 7th AOF activity, managed to send about 1.3 tons of bamboo seed, which is about 110 million odd, if I'm not mistaken, around the country. So if you see bamboo and you're grateful for it, you know who to thank for it. He's also on the project governance committee for Junglescapes. He's been associated with them for a long time, and he's presented quite numerous papers on the subject of ecological restoration in the various conferences around the world held by the Society for Ecological Restoration. Hanmant is very passionate about spreading awareness, and he's given a lot of talks to students from schools to colleges on various environmental topics. He lives in Mysore and with his wife and two lovely children. So that's a quick introduction to Hanmant. Ramesh, as always, keeps things brief and humble. That's how I always known him all my life. Whenever I've known him the last 15 odd years. Ramesh is the managing trustee of Junglescapes. He started off his career as a finance professional in a MNC in Chennai, but I think his passion for wildlife conservation completely took over everything that he wanted to do in life, and he took an early retirement in 2006 to get into this wholeheartedly. And I think the results show for themselves. If any of you are near Bandipur or want to go near Bandipur, please go visit. You'll be stunned by what you see. You'll see a strict line between what has been done by Junglescapes and how things are if you don't do restoration and you don't fix it, right? You'll see a clean line showing you the impact of their work. Ramesh is also a certified ecological restoration practitioner. He's a member of the board for the Society for Ecological Restoration. And he's also the co-chair of the Natural Regeneration Network of ACR. Sounds like a lot of words, but these are very prestigious positions. And, it's amazing that Ramesh is giving India a big name in all of these places. He's also a member of the expert committee on invasive species appointed by the High Court of Madras for India. That's about them. I think their work, when they speak about, will speak for itself. If there's anything else you would like me to add, please let me know. Anyone else here? Many of you know both of them quite well. Please feel free to add. Otherwise, we can get started.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Vikram. And over to you, both Ramesh and Hanmant. Just before that, what we'll do is we will take up question and answers at the end of the session. So I will, both Vikram and Subodh will look out for questions even in the chat box. And if there are any, if there is anything in between to ask, please post it in the chat group. Once the meeting is over, we will, once the talk is over, we will take up the question and answers. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Sanjay. Thanks, Vikram, for your very nice, kind words. Whenever we hear this, we feel that there's so much more that we should do and we can do. And there's a lot out there that can be done and should be done. Thanks again for arranging this and for inviting me and Ramesh for this. Looks to be a very exciting crowd, and thanks for that. So if I can just quickly start off, can I share screen?
Yes, please.
Please go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So we'll share screen and yeah. Can you, are you able to see the whole screen?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Yeah. So we begin with, most of us here are all on the same page. Like Vikram was mentioning earlier, there's a lot of overlap between wildlife conservation and ecological restoration, and in fact, even SRAG, which is the environmental sustainability. So basically, we are all thinking about, what are the issues and how can we set it right? So we see problems like mass extinctions and so on, and many of us don't know what is the link. For example, what has wildlife conservation got to do with ecological restoration is a question that I have been asked many a time. So in fact, today we thought that we'll just try to bring out certain correlations between climate change and wildlife conservation, so that these are not very apparent to everyone that they are in fact actually linked. So a presentation here, beginning with So now in present, like most of you may know that ecological restoration now has gained enormous significance and importance in the globe, particularly with the United Nations declaring this particular decade, 2021 to 2030, as the decade for ecological restoration. And the IPCC, that is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is coming out with its sixth report, seventh report, and every report is giving a prognosis worse than the previous one. So, and scientists all over the world are more than ever engaged in trying to find out what could be the impacts of climate change. So now, how is it that we have reached this stage where we are now seeking desperate measures? So the ecological restoration imperative is simply, we are just putting down some facts out there. The natural ecosystems, our rivers, etc., forests, whatever, the issue is that the rate of degradation is much faster than the rate of natural recovery. If you leave things alone by themselves, yes, they do recover. But the rate at which they recover compared to the rate at which it is being exploited or degraded, now there is no match. The rate of degradation is far too high. So which is the reason why there is the need to restore. So reversing this to a net gain requires an effort from our side, from the humans. And earlier, a decade ago, we were telling that let us conservation. Now conservation is no longer enough. We have to restore. And that is the place wherein the ecological restoration makes its presence felt. So now if we were to look at common symptoms of problems, we can just say that it's all made up. It's just a hype. It's just fanciful notions that people are talking about to make a lot of money. So is it a fact that there are things that are going wrong? So if we look at generally across the globe, what is happening? So we can see that weather patterns are becoming unpredictable. Just today, we heard the news that a huge dam on the river Tista in Sikkim, in northern Sikkim, has burst and inundated the lower flooders and so many terrible destruction. Apparently, the dam itself cost around 25,000 crores to build, if the newspaper reports are to be believed. So just one disaster, small, minor disaster is all it takes to wipe out so-called gains of so many years. So the more the attention we pay to climate and its adverse effects, the better it's going to be, even economically, for human beings. So we have pollution that is everywhere. Just in the evening, I was having a talk with someone from SRAG, and they said that they have found microplastics in the food chain everywhere, in Japan and in the human body, and perhaps even in the clouds. I'm told you have microplastics. It won't be surprising long before it is, we find microplastics in our own blood. So that is the extent of pollution that we have managed to create. High consumption levels are leading to more and more degradation of natural resources. So in order to compete with the gross domestic products of with other nations to make ourselves develop. See, we are not against development, but it should be in a manner which is sustainable. It should be in a manner where we don't harm ourselves at the end. So that is another thing that's happening. Infrastructure development is taking a very heavy toll. Pandemics are here to stay. We don't know, because zoonotic jumps are happening. Wherever we go into the forest, we come across animals and insects and birds and so on. And we don't know exactly when a virus is going to take a jump from one kingdom to the other, what we call as the zoonotic jumps. So it is perhaps because of such things that, in fact, COVID-19 did happen when it did happen. So the other issue is the plant and animal species are going extinct at a very alarming rate. That is of particular concern, especially to the wildlife conservation people, because now we are going to see how that particular thing is linked to the overall problem statement. So here is a thought for all of us to think. We have had 5 mass extinctions till now. See, in the last 4.5 billion years, which are most and all of the 5 are linked to global warming. So if the scientists out there are to be believed, we could be staring at the beginning of the 6th mass extinction, again caused due to global warming. So that is the enormity of the situation that we are facing. And it's crucial that we need healthy and resilient ecosystems if this kind of a scenario is to be avoided. I'm not trying to scare anyone here, but these are facts which we have been able to cull out from here and there and to present it in a cohesive manner so that we know what we're looking at. We have to understand the gravity. It's not enough that, okay, we have a good sizable crowd here, 40, 50, but we are 7 and odd billion people, and everyone has to put in their weight. They have to throw their weight behind this kind of a movement. So we can't do that unless we understand what's actually going on. So this is an attempt at that. So of course, now the ecological restoration has become an imperative more than anything else. So a very brief understanding of the link between human activity and global warming and climate change. Yes, it is true that we have had changes. The earth keeps spinning, it keeps rotating, it keeps revolving. We have our share of ice ages and receding ice ages. We've been through that. But the key thing there is that change happens over millions of years. We have time to evolve and adapt. But whereas here, as you can see, towards the right end, last 11,500 years, there is a gradual increase in temperature. That's it. Maybe less than half a degree over 10,000, 11,000 years. Now, in the last 150 years, we have had a temperature increase of 2 degrees centigrade, which is 400 times. If you take 0.5 degrees as a unit, 2 degrees is 4 times that. So which is 4 times is 400% more, and in just 150 years. That, that alarming rate at which the temperature has gone up is what is creating the climate change, the abrupt change. So this is the issue what we are actually facing because of our industrial growth. The global temperatures are going up and interacting with the heat and the movement, creating all kinds of climate issues. And if we are to look up at where from the global greenhouse gases emissions are coming, which is the sector that is largely responsible for the emission of greenhouse gases, which in turn leads to global warming, we can see that the energy sector is the biggest, I can't say, but I have to say it's the culprit, the biggest culprit in these emissions. The regular other industry and agriculture, forestry, because people always tend to blame, oh, you have so many, you grow rice in so many areas, so that's the reason why you have so much of methane. You have so many cows, and that's the reason why so much of methane is there and the greenhouse gas is there. Yes, no doubt, yes, it's true. But what is the percentage? It's only 18%. Agriculture, forestry, and land use combined is 18.4% they contribute to global greenhouse gases. Whereas energy, when you are lighting your homes to keep the cold off, when you're making central AC, central heating, and so on and so forth, everything requires energy. And that energy, to produce that energy, is where the greenhouse gases are at its top. So when we talk about environment and ecosystems, environment is whatever we see, whether it's natural or man-made, is environment. Ecosystems, on the other hand, are seas, rivers, water bodies, forests, etc. And an ecosystem, the interesting thing is that an ecosystem is interdependent upon the living and non-living organisms and abiotic factors in that ecosystem. It's dependent. You change one and you change the whole thing. The interdependence goes away and the whole ecosystem crashes. So that is what we call as an ecosystem, where, it could be an estuary, it could be a river, it could be a forest, a desert, whatever. So ecosystem restoration means restoring an ecosystem back to its original state. Not what we decide it should be, but what was existing historically. That is what we have to restore it to. So just an example of how we manage to pollute our water. It's a big list. I'll probably share this list. We have managed to create chaos everywhere. So it is just a small, any person who can Google and find out how are we managing to pollute our waters, you can say this, bad scene. And our forests, culling the forest. See, the irony here is that every year you lose almost, there are many statistics. Every decade, a country the size of Denmark, we lose in terms of forests. So you can see that, naturally, and the irony is that it's used to grow food. And of the food which is cultivated, 40% of that food is wasted. So you clear the forest, you prevent the carbon from getting sequestered, you cultivate something, okay, fair enough, because you're cultivating something. But of whatever we cultivate, the whole thing is getting, not the whole thing, about 40% is getting wasted. That's the global average of food wastage. It's 40%. So it's a shame that we are, in the name of, I don't know, development or whatever, are managing to create so much of chaos. The other thing is that because of our travel and the way we move from one place to another, the seeds of invasive species are everywhere. As Vikram was mentioning earlier, now every forest, barring a very few, most of the forests have one or the other invasive species which just takes over the forest, because the problem with invasive species is that the native pests, viruses and fungus don't attack it because they are new. They are yet to adapt to it. So they have a free run and they just take over the natural landscapes. The other problem, roads, electric lines, railway lines, fragmented forests, which don't allow the free movement. They cut the mobility of elephants and other larger animals to go and, for the gene pool transfers to happen. So these are the issues, some of the issues that we're actually facing today. And the process of assisting the recovery of an ecosystem that has been degraded, damaged, or destroyed, that is what we could call as ecological restoration. So the next few slides, I request my colleague Ramesh to take over. Ramesh, can you take over from here?
Yeah, Anumant, I'll stay with the previous slide itself. And Anumant, could you help me move the slides because you got the access?
Yeah, you just tell me, I'll move it. Yeah.
Sure, thank you. So I will spend a few minutes talking about ecological restoration as a discipline. What is the genesis of this, and what does it exactly mean? Ecological restoration is a fairly new discipline within the larger arena of conservation. So it's gained prominence over the last 40 years, I would say. Prior to that, one had not heard about ecological restoration or its need. So the growth of ecological restoration has coincided with the increase in the level of degradation, as Anumant explained. So you've seen a large increase in the degree of degradation over the last 40 to 50 years, which again coincides with the Industrial Revolution and the high focus on consumption and GDP, etc. So that is why restoration has also grown very rapidly over the last 40 years to become a very important discipline. And the UN has declared 2020 to 2030 as the decade of ecological restoration. As Hanuman said, the restoration is basically the process of assisting the recovery of an ecosystem. So what we are trying to do is to help the ecosystem recover on its own. It's not that we are trying to create a new ecosystem or reinstating an ecosystem by ourselves, but it is helping the ecosystem to recover on its own. And what do we try to help it go back to? All ecosystems are in a constant state of evolution. So a particular ecosystem 1,000 years back, 500 years back, 100 years back, is a constant state of evolution due to various natural factors like changes in climate, changes in hydrology, etc., which happen naturally. And therefore, what we're trying to do is help it go back to a state in which it was before it got degraded or damaged. So that is the objective of ecological restoration. Next, please. Throughout the world now, there's a very high focus on planting of trees. And the goal behind that is to mitigate climate change. How is ecological restoration different from these approaches? These approaches are what I would call afforestation or reforestation. How is ecological restoration different? Next one, please. Unlike tree planting exercises, ecological restoration applies to ecosystems which typically do not have trees. So you have lakes or rivers which typically do not have trees. You also have terrestrial ecosystems like deserts, which have very few trees, or ecosystems like shola grasslands, which have a mix of grasslands and woody forests. So ecological restoration applies to a wide array of ecosystems with or without tree presence. That is very important to note, because currently the focus on tree planting is resulting in a situation where trees are getting planted on grasslands, trees are getting planted in semi-arid areas like the fringe areas of deserts, etc. And we are talking about converting deserts to green areas, etc. Which is very sad, because each of these ecosystems has its own unique biodiversity and unique role to play, not only in terms of biodiversity, but also in terms of combating climate change. And that is what we're coming to learn now, that many of these ecosystems can sequester equal or more carbon than woody forests. Next, please. Ecological restoration is a very holistic activity. The objective is not to plant trees. Anumant will explain later that in our approach in junglescapes, we don't plant any saplings at all. So it is an activity aimed at recovery or revival of multiple ecosystem parameters, revival of soil attributes, revival of the hydrological functions, revival of native flora and fauna, improvement in the gene flows between different landscapes, and also most importantly, since you're all wildlife lovers, if you take a forest like Bandipur Tiger Reserve, you can say it is a dry deciduous forest ecosystem, or you can say parts of it is moist deciduous, parts of it is tropical thorn forest. That is a very broad classification. But within that, if you go to a tropical thorn forest like the Lokere Reserve Forest, that is where we work, you will find a large number of microhabitats. You can find a different microhabitat along a stream, different microhabitat along a hillside, and each of these microhabitats has its own microclimate. So ecological restoration focuses on making sure that these microhabitats are preserved. So we do not, because each of these microhabitats plays host to different species of fauna, and they're very, very critical. So, and we cannot destroy them. A very classic case of microhabitat getting destroyed are sand dunes. Most of our beaches used to have a very specialized ecosystem called sand dunes. And you can see due to construction and various activities, you go to any beach now, you don't find any sand dunes. So ecological restoration is a holistic activity based on three core principles: ecosystem integrity. So we don't try to convert a grassland into a forest or vice versa. Ecological resilience, building ecological resilience. Resilience means the ability of the ecosystem to naturally withstand shocks, withstand disturbances, and recover on its own. So our idea is to build the resilience. That is why it's focusing on so many attributes. And third is optimal intervention. So intervene only to the basic level which is required. Next, please. Ecological restoration also has very wide application. That is what we call the restoration continuum. So it covers natural and cultural landscapes. So natural landscapes like forests, then you have intermediate ecosystems or landscapes like rivers, which pass through both natural areas and towns and cities. Then you have urban landscapes. Restoration in urban landscapes is increasingly becoming very important. Oceans and coast, which again a mix of nature and culture. Farmlands and grasslands, mountains and peatlands, which may be more aligned to nature and less to cultural landscapes. So it's a very wide spectrum that we cover in ecological restoration, and not just limited to planting of trees. Next, please. Restoration follows natural progression. We're giving here an example from a terrestrial forest ecosystem, but whether you take a forest or a river or a lake, there is a natural progression. So in a terrestrial forest, we first focus on restoring the soil and hydrology. And once these are restored, we find that the soil health improves, the soil microbes start coming back, and that creates the right environment for the plants to come back. The plants that come back first is what we call the pioneer plant species. Pioneer plants are those which are very resilient, hardy plants. So they can survive in a semi-degraded condition, which is not fully healthy. And they in turn do the job of repairing the soil and creating the right environment for the successional tree species to come up. Successional tree species are more sophisticated and they require a healthier environment to survive, to establish and survive. And this is the natural progression that we try to follow. And along with this, you have the return of fauna. The return of fauna happens when the habitat improves, and the fauna in turn helps in the habitat to improve because they are seed dispersal agents, they add more manure to the soil, etc. So the fauna plays the role of both restoration, helping restoration, and also being a beneficiary of restoration. Next, please. Ecological restoration, as we saw, is not limited to remote forest areas. So you can have projects in urban areas. There are more and more people doing projects in urban areas, even though small pockets of land. Rural areas, we have got ecosystems or small wilderness or natural areas. Karnataka is very famous for, Maharashtra and Karnataka are very famous for sacred groves. Many of the sacred groves are badly degraded, and therefore there is a lot of scope for ecological restoration in rural areas as well. There's also a high focus on restoring industrial sites like mining sites or chemically contaminated sites, etc. Next, please. I talked about optimum intervention. The level of intervention is directly proportionate to the remaining ecological resilience or the remnant ecological resilience of the site. So where the ecological resilience which is remaining is very high and where the degradation has been low, we allow the ecosystem to recover on its own. That is called spontaneous regeneration. So you just keep it safe, keep it guarded, and don't allow further disturbance, and it regenerates by itself. Whereas when there is a moderate level of disturbance and the ecological resilience has come down, then we have assisted natural regeneration, where we do not do introduction of saplings or introduction of plant material, but we improve the soil and hydrology and allow the system to come back on its own, where the level of degradation or disturbance is very high and the remaining or remnant resilience is very low. Like, for example, a mining site where the soil substrate is completely damaged, then we need more active restoration. This is very similar to a sickness in a human body. When the level of immunity is very high, the doctor might tell you, please take rest for a couple of days or a week and you will recover. If there is slightly higher problem and your level of immunity is lower, he may give you antibiotics. Or if the problem is much bigger, you might be admitted into a hospital. So it's a very broad analogy I give similar to this. Next, please. Now, both restoration ecology and conservation biology are parts of the overall picture of conservation. They are two sides of the same coin, because unless you have healthy habitats, you're not going to have protection of wildlife. That is why we say in many of the national parks in India, they are legally protected, but ecologically they are vulnerable and not protected. So most of the problems that we see today, like animals coming out in the forest, out of the forest into village lands, in places like Nilgiris, Kodaikanal, we have gaur and other animals coming into the towns now. And that's all because the habitat is degraded. And unless you improve the habitat health, we're not going to be able to conserve wildlife. Now, these two disciplines are very distinct. Restoration ecology is based on a different set of sciences like soil science, geology, hydrology, plant science or botany, etc. Whereas conservation biology is largely based on focus on fauna, with the focus on wildlife behavior, genetics, human wildlife conflict, how to protect wildlife from activities like poaching. All those things come under the threats that you are addressing in conservation biology are quite different from the threats that you're trying to address in restoration ecology. So they're very complementary disciplines and go hand in hand in improving biodiversity. Next, please. Now, we're talking about climate change, and now it is increasingly becoming evident that biodiverse ecosystems are far better at sequestering carbon and also adding to and one of the ways they sequester carbon is to capture the carbon and flow it back into the soil. So the diversity and abundance of plant and animal life has a direct bearing on soil carbon. Next, please. So one of the studies have found that higher the diversity of mammal species, the greater is the carbon in the soil, which is not surprising because the mammals are the ones which consume the plants and then it goes back into the soil, and some of the carbon is retained in the soil because the plants absorb the soil from the atmosphere. Then the animals or the herbivores consume them, and then it goes back into the soil, and some of it stays in the soil and some of it is released back into the atmosphere, which again comes back to the plants. So it is not surprising that greater the diversity of herbivores, there is greater soil carbon capture. So diversity of species plays a very important role in combating climate change. Next, please. So there's a carbon cycle. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the carbon cycle of the plants through photosynthesis. They capture carbon, which is the energy, goes to the animals, then goes back to the soil, and then part of it gets released. So that is what I wanted to cover about, to give a broad overview about ecological restoration as a discipline. And now I hand it over to Andaman to describe the work that Junglescapes does. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ramesh. Yeah, so we have Rotary, the seventh area of focus in Rotary, which is supporting the environment. And we also have Junglescape. So together, we find that we can work together in a complementary and a very effective manner to bring and spread awareness. Because Rotary has a fantastic network, and there's a lot that needs to be done in the area of spreading awareness. So a bit about what we have been doing at Junglescapes. So we are, as Vikram in his introduction told, we started out in 2008. So that's 15 years we've been doing here. We follow the community participative model because we feel that they are the real custodians of the area where they live. We go there maybe once a month or twice a month, but they are people who live there at the edge of the forest, and it is they who face the threat of conflict with animals day in and day out. So they need to be the people to understand why is it that we are restoring the forest. So we have several programs aimed at educating them, capacity building, etc. And therefore they also work. And it's not easy to work in the forest. You can't ask a guy who has lived his life in the city to come and work in the forest. They can't. The fear of animals, threats, from elephants or tigers or leopards or whatever, the thorns, the habitat in which they have to work. So it is the tribal who is ideally suited to both work in the forest as well as the person who needs it most. So we follow that community participative model. We, as Vikram briefly mentioned, we did follow the assisted natural regeneration methods to leverage nature. See, people talk about Miyawaki method, which is fine. We have no truck with that. But how much can we restore? What is the extent you can restore? Maybe a 30 by 30 or a 50 by 50 square feet or 2,500 square feet. That's it. And that takes it's very expensive. Now we are talking about areas like in square kilometers. So the amount of money, if we have to follow that, it's just impossible. People would, can't even start imagining the kind of money that would be required to restore large tracts. So we have to, adopt ways and means where we can leverage existing technologies. And fortunately for us, we have a fantastic technology called Mother Nature. So we leverage nature and we allow her to do the bulk of the work. So in degraded systems, the major job for us is undo what human beings have created as a problem. In this case, the invasive species. So remove the invasive species, that's the active part. The restoration, ensure that the other secondary invasives don't come in, and then allow nature to do its magic, to work its magic, and you have the things, native species coming back. So to a large extent, we don't plant saplings at all. In fact, I remember in 2010, I think we bought around 40,000 saplings of various trees, which we thought were ideal for that kind of a place. With great gusto, we planted everything. We came back and we kept coming back because it was rather new at that time. And much to our disappointment, we found that the survival rate was very, very, very poor. Even now, if we search, we will find 1 or 2 saplings from that lot, but still they are at 2 feet height. They're still at the same, whatever. They just cannot adapt. So it is our thinking which is the issue here. We leave it to nature. We learned from that, and we found that all you need to do is support the native saplings which are already there. Take out a small trench, costing nothing at all, very, very low amount. It helps retain the moisture of the rains for 1 month more in summer. And that 1 month is extremely crucial and critical. And you can see that the areas where we have taken these trenches out, just an example, have really blossomed. You compare to areas which have not had this treatment done to them, they have really grown. And it is such a pleasure to see that these kinds of simple techniques of leveraging nature can yield such rich dividends. So, as Ramesh said, restoration is an emerging science. We have restored 3,000 to 4,000 acres in Bandipur Tiger Reserve. Actually, it's 4,000, but 3,000 completely. That's about 12 square kilometers. And we are poised at this stage to do around 400 to 500 acres every year. And we are looking to scale it up further. We are actually looking not to scale it up further in Bandipur alone, but we are looking to scale it up in areas like in Nagarhole or in Biligaranganbetta or in the Nilgiris or in Coimbatore or in other places who require our help. And because there is such a lot that we have learned over the past 14, 15 years, and we would love to actually, go wherever people want us to try and tell them and share with them whatever we know. So that's about Junglescapes. And the left picture in the left shows the award that we received that was in Brazil. And the picture on the right shows us a picture with the award. All the tribal members are there with us, holding the award. And to give a brief about where we work, so you can see that the Nilgiri biosphere in one part on the northern side starts from, in the west, it starts from the Brahmagiri and the Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary, Muttanga Wildlife Sanctuary, coming into, Nagarhole, and then the Bandipur Tiger Reserve, south of which is Mudumalai. Then to the east, you have Satyamangalam Tiger Reserve, Biligaranganbetta, and finally the Kaveri Wildlife Sanctuary, like a sort of a necklace. But the problem here is these are fractured. They are not contiguous. There is no continuum. So that is where the importance and the thrust has to be given to re-establish the continuum and the continuity amongst these patches of forest. So coming to Bandipur Tiger Reserve, this is the infamous Lantana camara, which you can see in your pictures here. And you can see a very telling, often sometimes neglected, stumps of trees in black. That is because they have been fire affected. Now, you would have wondered, if the trees caught fire, then what is a lantana doing there? Lantana is a fire-loving shrub. So it doesn't die when there is a fire. In fact, the content of lantana contains a small percentage of essential oils, which actually help the fire. So you can see that now that the native trees and its seeds are destroyed by the fire, but after the fire, the lantana has copiced and come back to completely take over the forest now. You can have no native saplings or species there. And naturally, if there are no native shrubs and trees, what are the deers and the elephants going to eat? They're going to come to the next agricultural ragi field and eat all this stuff which is available there. So that is the genesis of the conflict. So about lantana, brought into India again for the sake of our visual appeal, looks nice, pretty, and so on and so forth. Now it is everywhere. It does not allow native species to grow. It's a fire-loving plant. Herbivores don't eat it. But unfortunately, and luckily for lantana, the seeds are edible. So the birds eat the seeds. They go and perch in the nearby tree 500 meters away, and the droppings contain the seeds of the lantana. And you will find, if you observe, you will find a ring of lantana in a fresh area which was previously uninfested. you will find a ring of lantana shrubs coming up wherever the birds have sat. So from there, it propagates through vegetative reproduction. And again, the birds also help it. And, the whole thing is tailor-made for domination. So it's estimated that around 50 to 60% of Bandipur is invaded by Lantana camara in various degrees, which is around 500 to 600 square kilometers. And in 15 years, we have managed to address around about 12 to 15 square kilometers. That's it. So you can, this is just in one tiger reserve in the country. If you look at all tiger reserves and other, reserve forests, you will find that the challenge is, it's humongous. So we need to wake up. We need to wake up and call our elected governments and tell them this is the scale of the problem that we are facing, and it needs to address these issues. So these are pictures from our removal of the Lantana camara on the top left. The one on the right is the other devil that Vikram mentioned earlier, the Senna spectabilis, again a weed from South America. And here, even if you leave a root fragment in the soil, it comes back. In the case of lantana, you remove the root stalk and it's dead. You can see, how we have upturned the lantana because we don't want to allow it to go back to the earth, so that, and allowing it to recopis and come back. So that's how we treat the lantana. But in the case of Senna spectabilis, we have a much bigger problem on hand. And of course, the bottom left picture shows after we remove. That's not the end of the story. In fact, it's just the beginning. Removing is just the beginning. And then you have to treat the soil, because there are zillions of seeds of the invasive species left on the forest floor. If you leave it and come back the next year, you'll have a plantation of either lantana or senna. So we have to see that, you counter it through either things like grass or bamboo, so that they also start coming up and they fight the invasive species. So this is a picture where you can see that the actual lantana shrub is burnt due to fire, but from below, the plant is recopicing and coming back. So that is the ability of this particular shrub to combat fire. Whereas all the native species are dead, this thing comes back. So there is no competition at all. So Ramesh mentioned how we improve soil. This just happened in a matter of 2 or 3 years. We took out all these gully plugs to prevent soil erosion and to catch the rain. And in 3 years, you can see how the soil has been caught and now grass is growing there. It provides a good place for native sapling tree species also to grow there. And the process of restoration begins there. And these are contour trenches. We take these trenches all along contours so that you trap any which way that the water flows during the rains. It gets trapped there. And the loose soil is also good. We have grass seeds dribbled in the loose soil area, and the grass comes up. The trenches form the water reservoir for any kind of seeds which may also flow in. And therefore, it's a good way of doing the restoration progress, improving the hydrology. We have done till now more than 40 kilometers of such trenches. This is one way in which we do improve the abiotic factor, which is the hydrology. Simple check dams, quite cheap, 20 to 25,000, because there's not even half a kilogram of cement anywhere. The soil and the stones are all available locally. The people there, using their own native intelligence, they tell us where it has to be done, the people, and we tell them, okay, go ahead, let's do it here. So that's it. And water is available for animals, ideal place for birds. And we have done around close to 100 dams till now. And of course, we can do much more. So these are various, photographs of where we have done these kinds of things. And as I told you, mentioned earlier, we have got various ways in which, but grass is among the most useful what we have found, because it sequesters carbon, it is a food to herbivores, and it combats invasive species. So we always go to grass, and we either through seed collection, as you can see in the top right, or through slips, which you can see at the bottom right. And we used it. This is the one on the bottom left is a fire affected area. You can see how well the grass has come back there. And bamboo is another beautiful. You can see my colleague Ramesh in the background, where he is explaining about how bamboo is a very, very important tool in combating both climate change as well as prevention of soil erosion. And it has got multiple uses. So it can be used even in non-protected areas, in reserve forests or in wastelands, to sequester carbon and also for alternate livelihood. So we had another program going on where we taught the local women how to make furniture out of lantana as a source of alternate employment and livelihood. So this is quite popular among many people, but it's hard work. It has to be, as time progresses, as the years progress, the lantana has to be brought in from farther and farther areas, so the cost goes up. This is another thing which we have done. So this is also a part where we help the society, the local society, by, it's like a win-win. The people go into the forest to cut firewood, bring it back and burn it in their inefficient chulas. So by giving these kinds of equipment, fully subsidized, almost fully subsidized, we prevent them from going to the forest because they can use just twigs. And on the other hand, they save time, especially the ladies in the house, in the village houses. They are so eager. Even as I speak, there is a huge demand for these boilers. And even if we were to take a program of distributing about 5,000 boilers, now it will be done within 2 or 3 months. That's the kind of, earlier, the first time round, we were going around in our Jeep doing demos. Oh, please take this, please take it, is very useful, blah, blah, all that. But once they started using it, we take a small amount because we believe that nothing should be given totally free. So the total thing costs around 10,000 rupees. We take about 1,500 rupees from them. And they were very hesitant in giving that 1,500 because they didn't know the value of it. And once they started using it, now we get on an average 5 phone calls every day. Has the next program started? When can I get it? So, and by preventing them from going to the forest and cutting down, biodiversity is preserved, carbon sequestration is done. Every year, per annum, per boiler, we can say by way of reduced emissions, 2 tons of carbon dioxide is not released into the atmosphere. So till now we have done around 1,700 boilers, and it's a big hit. So restoration outcomes, and I would again like Ramesh to come in and explain the next few slides, please.
Yeah, the next slide, Naman, please. Yeah, so sometime in 2022, we did a survey of vegetation in 6 of our restoration plots. These plots have been under restoration for more than 5 years in Lokere Reserve Forest, and 2 plots in the Gopalswamy Betta range of Bandipur Tiger Reserve. So we got external experts to come and do the floral surveys, and they found that there are totally 355 species of plants. And what is interesting is that you will find that out of these 355, only about 90 species are tree species. So trees do not form a majority of plant species in a dry deciduous forest ecosystem. We've got herbs and shrubs, which are the major part, which is almost about 130 species. Grasses, there are about 19 species of grasses, but if you look at other areas also, I think the total count is about 24 species of grasses in this entire landscape. And you have other plants, habits like climbers, creepers, etc. So we compare this with a reference model. A reference model is a benchmark, basically, which we want to reach. Unfortunately, since most parts of Bandipur are invaded by lantana, it is very difficult to get a pristine site which we can use as a reference model. So what we do is to try to build a different reference model from various sources of information. We may go to some of these pristine, healthy sites and make an enumeration. We may also look at published data, etc. And we find that we are almost at 70% of the reference model now. Sorry. Next one. There is also a significant increase in species diversity across plant habits. So you can see the big increase in shrubs and herbs. Why are shrubs and herbs very important? Most of the herbs are annual herbs. So they come up after the monsoon and then disappear during summer. But these are very important for a lot of insects and small mammals as well. And shrubs, some of them are perennial and some of them are annual. So together, shrubs and herbs are what we call the pollinator species. So a lot of pollinators prefer these kinds of plants. So if you want to create a pollinator habitat, you need a large number of shrubs and herbs. The next one. Rewilding. One of the key goals of restoration is to create habitats where animals can come back. If you see, because of lantana, many of the large animal species have reduced. Now you don't see the big dhole packs in Bandipur any longer. You see small packs of 4 or 5 numbers. That is because dholes, I'm giving dhole as an example. The dholes are pursuit animals, so they need to pursue a deer over large distances. Now, how do we pursue a deer if the whole area is occupied by lantana? It's impossible to pursue the deer. So the dhole pack sizes are reduced because the pack size depends on how much food they can find. Similarly, vultures. Vultures are very large wingspans, and they need open grasslands areas to land if they want to eat the carrion or dead animals. Now, if the entire area is occupied by lantana, there's no way a vulture is able to land there. So that is why the vulture population in a place like this also comes down. There are multiple impacts on animals because of lantana. Therefore, one of the key goals is helping many species of fauna to come back, not just elephants, not just tigers, but multiple species, including insect species. So we find that in the restored areas, the key mammal species are the large mammal species, I mean like leopards or tigers or sloth bear, etc. That has gone from 6 to 18, and all major taxa are present now. If you look at located reserve forest, when we started restoration, there are hardly any mammals except leopards. We would never see a gaur, but now we see gaur very regularly in the located reserve forest. Bird species have gone up from 35 to almost 100. We are, I would say, at 50% of the desired number or the reference number. We did a detailed insect survey about 3 years back, and we could only do it during the daytime. It was very risky to go into the forest in the night. And we did not use any capture of insects. It was just simple methods, and that showed that we are at 45% of reference. So there's a very good rewilding progression. And as the forest improves, the rewilding happens more and more naturally. Next one. So you can some pictures. We take pictures of evidence of wildlife like pug marks or scat evidence, etc. We try to document them with GPS coordinates. But this is an area where we would like to do more. And since you're all wildlife lovers, we would like more volunteers to come in to help us do this kind of wildlife enumeration work, which is very important to provide supporting evidence. Next, please. So these are some of the areas. On the top, you see an area which was completely occupied by lantana. This is in the Bandipur range of Bandipur Tiger Reserve. And on the right, you see the same plot. This is the plot along the Mangala Road, which is after about 5 years of restoration. Below on the left, you see immediately after the fire affected plot. And on the right, this is as you enter Bandipur on the left-hand side, you see the same plot after 2 years of restoration effort. Next, please. These are some of the restored areas in Lokere Reserve Forest. Lokere Reserve Forest is a tropical thorn, and in the hilly side and on the valley, it is dry deciduous. It's now become one of the most diverse habitats and an important elephant corridor. Next, please. One of the important outcomes which Hanumant alluded to is about the traditional knowledge of the indigenous communities. The indigenous communities have tremendous traditional knowledge about the microhabitats, animal movements, which plants exist where, which trees grow where, etc. Now, as they got disconnected from the forest, this knowledge was rapidly getting lost. So one of the big outcomes of restoration is that they're getting reconnected with the forest. Their knowledge is coming back because they're learning from the elders. They're learning from being in the field for long durations of time. And this knowledge in turn is invaluable for our restoration. We cannot do this restoration without the traditional knowledge. So one of the key outcomes of the ecological restoration work is reconnection of indigenous community to the forest, and thereby the revival of their traditional knowledge. So some of the key learnings, when you talk about restoration of an ecosystem, you're talking about all taxa of plants and animals, which could be microorganisms, insects, birds, etc., which are all important for the entire cycle to work. And stable ecosystems provide a lot of ecosystem services to humans, and also in mitigating human-wildlife conflict. So some of the villages, we interviewed them around located reserve forest, and they clearly say that the ingress of elephants into farmlands has reduced after the forest has become healthier. I already talked about the relationship between biodiverse ecosystem and climate change, and this message has to reach, importantly, policymakers. Policymakers are the ones who take decisions which impact all of us. Also, CEOs and other important influencers who can serve as sponsors, because restoration requires a lot of funding support as well. Next, please. So this is a quote which Hanumant wanted to add, which is about the entire web of life, of which humans are one small element, and whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. So we do something good to the web, we help ourselves. Next, please. So I've given some links to our work, also some links to videos and published material. You can go through it at your leisure. Next, please. So acknowledging our sponsors, GE has been a sponsor right from 2008. It's not easy to get corporate sponsors who stick to restoration for such a long period of time, because CSR normally requires results in a very short period of time. We are lucky to have sponsors like GE. L&T also has been a big sponsor in the last few years. Center for Environmental Management of Degraded Ecosystems. They are the people who developed the methods to manage lantana, and they passed on the knowledge to us. Ashirvadam is a foundation in Bangalore supporting us for 5 to 6 years. Forest Department has been big support to us. We are, in fact, the first NGO in Karnataka who got a MOU for restoration purposes. And now the MOU has been renewed for another 5 years. So there has been good support from the Karnataka Forest Department and the Society for Ecological Restoration, from whom we have gained a lot of knowledge sharing happens with them. So that, I think, brings us to the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rotarian Hanumant and Mr. Ramesh. Over to Vikram and Subodh. There are some questions in the chat box. Others who want to ask can also raise your hand. So you can just take, the alternatively between the chat box and the hands raised.
Makes sense. So I think we'll just go with some of these. There are some specific to Rotary, then there are others which are generic. I think what we will do is do it as we're over time. Thanks so much for those who are staying back. We'll try and do this as quickly as possible. I think the first one is, I think, Rotary specific. There is can we do something like ecological warriors with sustainability centers, very similar to how we have peace scholars using peace centers. Hanumant, maybe if you're familiar with these, what do you think? Is this something that SRAG and RFWC can come together and create?
Yeah, Vikram, I think that's a very good suggestion. We need to do something along those lines. Otherwise, the kind of challenges that we are facing, unless we bring about this kind of an awareness, I think this is a very good step. I think we'll probably talk with Aniruddha and Raju. May probably, we can initiate these things. Yes, nice suggestion. Thank you so much. Kiran sir, please, your turn if you want your question. You're on mute if you could.
Good evening, sir. Very crisp presentation. I have a couple of questions. You see, in the day by day, the infrastructure like road, rail, all these things are bound to increase with the limited this thing. Can you throw a couple of more lines on Milwaukee Forest? That is number A. Advantage or disadvantage, whatever you feel. Number two, you talked about the lantana camera. There are a lot of selective herbicides are there in some collaboration, and nowadays this drone spray has become more popular, and government has given little leniency on flying of drones for agriculture purpose and for forest purpose. How feasible it is to control the in a large scale the lantana camera?
Ramesh, would you like to take the question or?
Anumant, you can take the first one. I'll take the second one.
All right. So regarding Miyawaki, sir, I feel it has limited use. The limited use being the bringing the initiating a person into restoration or environment or nature, understanding and loving to coming to love nature, because it is very, very intensive and it cannot be done on scale. First, it is limited to the urban environment. And in the urban environment also, there is a lot of ground preparation, water requirement, but it gives very nice, quick result, which gladdens the heart of the person who is doing it. And therefore, that person may later on come more and more attached to nature and see what more he can do. So that way, it is definitely, I won't throw it out, but the way in which it has to be used, we cannot advocate it for all the environment. Yeah, Ramesh?
Yeah. Sir, you talked about the use of herbicides for lantana camara.
Especially in connection with drone spray.
Drone spray.
Larger.
There have been studies on using biological agents like a certain Mexican beetle, etc., to combat lantana. But not much research work has been done till now on use of herbicides. It's a very interesting point that you make. At the moment, the use of weedicides is not allowed inside protected areas like Bandipur Tiger Reserve. So because the chemical weedicides which are available in the market, those are not allowed to be used because they will impact the native flora and also impact the animals. But if there can be some harmless herbicides, which not chemical based, but which do not harm the animals, that can still be considered. I think, Anumant, people like Agriculture University should be working on this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point raised by Rotarian Kulkarni. Yes.
There are, to my knowledge, there are certain biological sprays are available. Of course, it is slow in action, but I'm only referring in correlation with the nowadays since leniency on drone spray, where you can in a short period you can cover the larger area.
There are some herbicides available. We could try it out in the village areas. We're outside the national park as a trial basis. We can try them out in the village areas on the lantana and see how it works.
Thank you.
Vikram, you are not audible.
Yeah.
No,
Next question. Before we go to Mr. Sumant, I'd like to take a question in the chat box from Jane Penson from the UK. She asks, how do you gain access to areas in order to restore the ecology? If the land is owned by an individual or a business or an authority, are you sometimes denied the opportunity to work there?
Well, Jane, the national parks are public property which are administered by the government. So the ownership lies with the state, and therefore we need to seek permission from the state to work inside these areas. There is restoration also happening in India on private lands, which again, there are examples in Maharashtra where there is an NGO working on restoring private lands, where they enter into a agreement with the landowners for 10 or 15 years to carry out the restoration. But in those cases, there has to be a clear benefit proposition that is given to the landowner as to how do they benefit from the return of biodiversity. That is where things like biodiversity offsets will play a big role in future. Otherwise, how do you convince private landowners to bring back biodiversity on their lands? But in our case, the land is owned by the state or the government, and we do get the permissions from the government for doing the job. And they're not averse to giving permission. Once we establish our credentials and we show them the methodology, and we also do a pilot project and approve the concept, they're not averse to giving permission.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there is also, I'll
John,
just quickly add some context there. Also, which people are looking in the private lands. There are now increasingly a lot of efforts going on into restoring lands, as part of carbon credit systems. That has become a financial incentive for many landowners. That is something that's taking off. And again, there are contracts which are usually about 15 years in length. There are problems with carbon credits, but it seems to be working in some places. Unfortunately, a lot of it becomes monocultural plantations per se, because then it's faster to get those carbon credits. So there are some of those things that are being looked around, especially in the developing countries, around the world. That is something that's happening. There are land trusts which are going out and buying out many of these lands or doing long-term leases. That is an approach that's being tried a lot, especially in, I think, in Latin America and South America. You see a lot of that, especially in countries like Argentina and other places where I think vast ownership is private, and also lots of wild lands which are otherwise inaccessible are being bought out or leased by land trusts. I think those are also other ways to look at the same question, Jane.
That's a very, very good point to make, Vikram. A lot of private lands are being taken up for greening, so-called greening. And if we can bring in the ecological restoration principles into those, there will be a win-win.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Thank you.
So moving on, we'll Mr. Sumant, please go ahead.
Hi Ramesh, how are you? Nice to see and wonderful to see that your work is going from strength to strength from the first time I filmed your project in 2015, I believe, in Bandipur. So my question to you was that the last month I was here giving my presentation out on how I've been using films to promote conservation and how we are taking it one step further by joining the right kind of people to the right kind of places so they can bring about the necessary changes, or even bringing about resources to the people working on field so they could kind of take the conservation to the next level. So that brief, like we are working in the grasslands in Bidar actually. And as you must be aware, grasslands in Bidar are completely unknown, and there's a lot of scope for work in that region, specifically in the North Karnataka region. So, but one good thing that we've encountered in the last couple of years since we've been there filming is that the department is quite willing to take up restoration work. There have been small plots where they're starting off removing of Gliricidia, the tree that they have planted, and then restoring it with grasslands. And I just recently had a talk with the DFO regarding the same, and she is quite upbeat about this particular thing about removing Gliricidia and replacing it with grass. So I was just wondering if you could kind of play a role here or try and contribute with your wealth of experience in the last so many years towards bettering the grasslands.
Yeah, Sumant, firstly, wonderful to see you here. Incidentally, Sumant was the person who did the first film about our Lantana project way back in 2014, I think.
Yes.
Yes, Sumant, we would love to share our knowledge. We also have other people within our group who have experience with different invasives. There are people who have worked on Gliricidia, people who have worked on Prosopis. So we have built up a team of expertise. So we would be very happy to look at this site in Bidar and offer our knowledge.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Congratulations, Ramesh. Go from strength to strength, upwards and onwards.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I'll just, I know we're way past time, but I think some other questions are very interesting. I think there is one, question that came up. I'm trying to scroll through all of this. Sorry. In the Dandeli Kali Tiger Reserve area, there's not too much lantana, I believe. Maybe it's because of the thickness or the climate in the Western Ghats. But it is there in some patches, and obviously there is a risk of that expanding. I think Rahul Babaji Dandeli, you're on the call. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask question further, elaborate. His question is, how do we avoid further spreading? I mean, prevention, if it's great, if it's not there. So how do we stop that from spreading?
Hanumant, would you like to take that?
Okay. So, for lantana to establish itself, it requires sunlight, and it requires, therefore, areas that are getting cleared. So most likely you will find it on the edge of the road before the thick forest actually begins. Once you have evergreen forest, then it is shaded out by the larger trees. So you will not find it so much in those areas. But it is these areas which allow sunlight to come in more in between the trees. There you will start finding lantana. So the first thing is nip it in the bud. The moment you recognize that, okay, there is an invasive weed here. Now, whether it could be lantana is just one. You could have eupatorium in your forest. You could have prosopis. If prosopis, no, it likes a dry area. So you could have parthenium. You could have so many other things. You have to keep a strict watch. So the best thing is take a local guide and ask him for the local name of the plant. If there is a local name, then it is native. You can more or less say it is a local thing because they have a traditional name. So it has been around for a long time. If it doesn't give you a name, sir, I don't know, or this or that, then you have to check with the proper authorities whether it's an invasive new plant. What is it doing here? So that is one thing where we can all keep our eyes and ears open and look out for anything which is rapidly growing and taking over. So the moment you find any such thing, you have to have a group of people find and remove it in the proper way without, the way it has to be done. Like, for example, you can't use heavy machinery inside an area where you want to eradicate because there's so much of seed there and you disturb the soil and it comes back faster than the natives. So you can't use, you have to be very precise in which is what the CEMD did for us. They taught us how to be very surgical in our removal of the lantana. So you attack only that, and the scar left behind in the soil is only about 6 to 8 inches. And then we again quickly fill it back with some grass or something. And then the thing we don't disturb the rest of the soil. So like that, you could approach us or anyone else who is competent and to see how this threat can be eliminated. Ramesh, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think, like you said, nip it in the bud. That is the most important thing. Because unfortunately, if there is some disturbance to that forest and the canopy opens up, the lantana is going to spread very fast. So better to nip it in the bud. And also, it's a high moisture area. Yeah. Please watch out for Senna spectabilis.
Senna, yes.
Senna spectabilis we have found is 10 times more aggressive than lantana. It is the grandfather of lantana. So please watch out in Dandeli for Senna spectabilis. As soon as it appears, you'll have to eradicate it.
This is the flowering season. It is a bright yellow, like a big pyramid. That's how it flowers.
Yeah, the problem with it is it actually looks good. So you actually don't have the heart to cut it.
Yeah. And this time we had a forest fire in most of the places in Kali Tiger Reserve. So, land, it might give a good chance for the lantana to spread out, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll get back to you on this. I need a little bit of more specific information about the other species as well. Thank you so much for your information.
Thanks so much, Rahul, for your question. So one more is again around this, but a different topic altogether. And I think this has got to do with the legal side of whether this can be done. And I think this is the origin of lantana also in India, where it has been used. It is used in landscaping by architects in an attempt to bring butterflies. Though I can think of much better ways to attract butterflies, but apparently some people are using it for butterflies. So the question is, how can we address this concern? Is there a way to address this concern? se. So
I think firstly, in any project which is either landscaping or greening, please do not use any exotic species, because we don't know when an exotic species will become invasive. All exotic species are not invasive, but over time, some of them may become very dominant and aggressive. So please use only native species. There are enough native species for, as Vikram said, for attracting butterflies or for various other functions. So that is one. Second is about legal provisions to prevent this. That has still not come about in India. There's still no legal provisions. I think there was recently an article also by Ankila where she's talking about lack of legal provisions, lack of quarantine procedures from what comes from abroad, etc. So that is a very, very weak point in India. Anything can come in and anybody can buy and sell. You get lantana seeds sold on Amazon. So you can buy all invasive species seeds on Amazon. So there is no legal provision in India as yet.
Just to add, see, we have two types of lantana in India. One is lantana indica, which is a much smaller thing with smaller leaves and no thorns. So that is fine. It is not invasive. Whereas lantana camara, which has those pink, orange, red flowers, though highly invasive, they're tall, they're thorny. So that is lantana camara. And some landscape artists or architects also know the difference between these two. And some use lantana indica, which is okay.
I didn't know that. Thanks for that, Anand. So I think even from landscaping this for butterflies also, I think first thing to do is ask people to stop spraying their gardens with all kinds of insecticides. You kill the caterpillars and wonder where the butterflies are. So some of those practices need to go in landscaping. You don't want the the caterpillar, but you want the butterfly. Thanks for that. I think there is one more question and then we can open it up. No, I think we are done with the questions on the chat. Any other questions anyone has would be happy. I'm sure Hanmant and Ramesh will be happy to take this. No. Great. Amazing session. Thank you so much. Every time I think I already know everything that you have to teach me, but I come into a session, I'm still learning from both of you. It's incredible after all these years. And thank you so much for this session. Sanjay, if you're doing the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much. It was a fantastic and fantastic session. Very educative too. I'm sure a lot of things to take away. That idea of simple techniques such as trenches, really very simple, and I think we should all implement it. And how restoration ecology and conservation biology are complementary. These are all some of the takeaways for us. I sincerely thank from the bottom of my heart on behalf of all of us here, both Rotarian Hanmant as well as Mr. Ramesh. I'm sure we will get in touch with you for more learning over a period of time. And of course, we can also get in touch and see how we can, bring this movement of restoration into Rotary. In fact, one of the key things that we want to focus on is habitat conservation. That is something that we are working towards. So thank you very much once again. We look forward to have more interaction with you in future. And thanks one and all the members who have joined and who have been actively participating by asking questions. Subodh, you want to ask something? I see you.
Yeah, sorry, this is coming a little late, but I was just thinking, Mr. Ramesh mentioned that they would love to have volunteers come and help. So I would like to know in what way can volunteers or RFWC assist in helping them?
I think we can have a discussion on that with your group on what can be the options, what can be the ways we can work together.
Sure, sir. Look forward to it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. And thanks to all the members who have joined from different parts of the world. I saw some members from Kenya, from Trinidad and Tobago, from
I see from Lisbon. I think almost 15 countries I counted last. So.
Yeah. Thank you all.
And all our SRAG members also.
Yes, all the SRAG members.
A big thanks to the SRAG team for turning up.
Led by Nagjyoti. Because she's.
Definitely, I have spreaded this all over the world.
Yeah.
All my contacts, 500 emails I have sent.
Yes, she makes sure that we have good attendance every time we have a meeting. Yeah, thank you.
For having unique sessions also, great learning as well as all are, very unique. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. And
Thank you.